be ashamed if you don't leverage him and his expertise. He knows what he's doing. I mean, I tested him for 30 minutes driving up here. All right, let me go ahead and get into this. Where are we? Let me tell you a little bit more about myself. Next slide. Let me step to the side here. That's my contact information. K-Carl Consulting Group. I have 3 organizations. This is my for-profit organization. I have a C4 called Liberty Messenger USA and have a 501c3 called the Douglas Initiative. And so under K-Carl Consulting Group, there resides the Frederick Douglass Republican Engagement Strategy, which you're going to hear a lot about tonight. Next slide. So I was advisor, of course, former Army officer. I was advisor to President Trump for 2 years. They asked me to come in and help them with messaging. They didn't follow anything I suggested. And it wasn't because of President Trump, it's because the operatives around him who don't want any good idea to get to Donald Trump that they did not create or control because they may get written out of the budget. That's what I deal with. Of course, I'm not going to let modesty prevent me from saying this. I have built over the past 15 years a huge reputation being the nation's #1 diversity engagement strategist and conservative messaging. At the end of tonight, you'll know why. Okay? Next slide. I wrote 2 books. The first book there, I don't want you to take any notes. I want you to pay full attention because everything that I'm covering tonight is in this second book in detail. Okay? So give me your full attention. All right? Next slide. I don't serve on too many national boards, but I pick and choose the one I do serve on. Citizens Defending Liberty out of Florida. And you recognize the second one here, right? One with Kelly Cole. I'm very selective the one I sit on for the national board. My time is important. And Kelly's is here. Hey Kelly, how you doing? Next slide. In case you didn't know, I've been out here about 13, 14 years doing this under the radar. Next. So I want to share this with you. Back in 2013, the National Federation of Republican Women at the 37th biannual convention that was in Louisville, Kentucky, they passed a resolution called the Frederick Douglass Republican Values Resolution. And in that resolution, they encouraged all women that's associated with the NFRW to become acquainted with our engagement strategy that you're going to learn about tonight and to share it with your state Republican caucus and Republicans at the national level. Something happened, it didn't gain any traction, but it was a noble gesture, right? And of course, this resolution is based on the first book that I wrote. Next. Also on the National Federation of Republican Women in Oklahoma, in 2016, they chartered a Republican women's club called the Frederick Douglass Republican Women in 2016, based on my first book. Next. The training objective tonight is really one thing. Empower conservatives with a proven persuasive messaging model to trump the race card, to empower you to become a better messenger of liberty. Okay? That's what it's all about in a nutshell. All right, next. Will you agree that really we have 2 challenges we're facing? Election integrity and messaging. And we got to solve those problems, I think, simultaneously. And I will say to you that election integrity is important, but messaging is essential. In other words, if we can stop the cheating and our messaging is still ineffective, we still lose. So we got to get this messaging thing right. That's what I will cover tonight. Okay? Next. When it comes to messaging, 98% of conservatives fail. 98%. So in this room tonight, there's only one person probably who can get it right. That's me. Because if you use the word conservative, you just fail. I'll break that down in a minute. This is my own personal research after 15 years of doing this. Next. You ever heard of the term turkey Republican? Turkey Republican is a phrase used in the black community to describe a Republican candidate that does not campaign in the black community during the primary. Because they're advised by their strategists Don't worry about the black vote. Let's don't campaign the black community during the primary. Let's get through the primary and get to the general election when it's close to Thanksgiving time and go after the black vote. We call them turkey Republicans. Turkey Republicans would never get to the black vote because you didn't plant any seeds in the primary that has something to harvest in the general election. That strategy doesn't work. Tonight, I will empower you how to stay away from being a turkey Republican. I know I'm kind of late, your primary is over with, but what do you do now going forward? Okay? We'll break that down. All in 1 hour. My gosh, you put me on a task. Next slide. I don't like giving this man any credit, Saul Alinsky, but he said something in his book, Roots for Radical, where he hit the nail on the head. He who controls the language controls the masses. And that's where we're getting our clock clean. They have demonized and redefined the word conservative. Where you tell somebody you're a conservative, you just grew 7 heads. Let's say if you're a black conservative, Reagan conservative, a Christian conservative. That's what you're saying, but that's not what people are hearing. You're a black conservative, you're a black racist. Reagan conservative, you're Reagan racist. If you identify yourself as a constitutional conservative or a Tea Party conservative, now you're a racist. Because they demonize the word Constitution too, right? And now they also demonize the word MAGA Republicans now to mean racist. Wow. My message to you is this. Stop using the word conservative. Get rid of it. I've been saying this since 2008. The word has to be redefined. Why are we continue to use a word we know it's going to lead to failure and defeat? Get rid of the word. Find another way to identify yourself. You follow me? You look like I just robbed a bank or something. Do you agree with me? Next slide. Shout the word racist, you take away conservatives' tongue. Put us on the defense. If we're going to save this nation, we got to be on the offense all the time. Okay? Next slide. Recognize this gentleman here. Let me play this audio for you. Let me set this up for you. So this video clip, this audio clip here, the Rush second album show back in November 2018. I've been advocating to stop using the word conservative since 2008. So 2018, Rush gets on the air and he had this to say, oh, let me back up. About 9 months before Rush made this comment, a friend of mine got a call from the Rush Limbaugh show. It was from Rush and the executive producer, which was her friend. They said, get in contact with K. Carl. Tell him we're watching him, we agree with him, and we're following him. And we had some technical difficulties. Let's go ahead and play it.
I don't like having to say this, but being honest with you and with myself is paramount. And I can tell you, and you know this without me telling you, that if conservatism and liberalism are brands, the left has succeeded in destroying the brand of conservative. All you have to say the word conservative and they think you're talking about a Nazi or a racist. Pushing conservatism is not the answer. So I would suggest to you, when you're out and about and you're doing, if you run into an occasion where you have the opportunity to talk politics, people that don't agree with you, do not use the word conservative. Do everything else, but don't call yourself that. Don't promote it. We've got a brand problem. It's time I hate it. I hate having to admit it. Get rid of it. Stop calling yourself that. Just be one. Just talk to people as one. You know what I think? I think you're going to find if you do this, that you're going to have far more people agree with your solutions than will disagree. If you don't identify yourself first. Nobody needs to abandon conservatism. It's just stop labeling everything we think or do as conservative and just do it.
Okay, hold it right there. So you see that Rush Limbaugh agrees with me. Okay? So the question is, okay, Carl, if you're saying that we should stop using the word conservative to identify ourselves and Rush agrees with you, what are we going to do? How should we identify ourselves? I'm glad you asked the question. And the way I'm going to answer that question by telling you this story. And as I share my story with you, you may see yourself within my story. It all started several years ago when I was invited to a friend's home to watch a football game. There were 19 or 20 blacks were there, my friends. They were all black Democrats. And that night, the subject of politics came up. When I shared with my friends that I was a conservative Republican, guess what? The attacks began. One after another, they called me everything but a child of God. Uncle Tom, foot shuffler, the house N-word. Your parents must be disappointed in you. How could you do such a thing, man? You a sellout. Their insults ran the gamut. But instead of getting upset, I started thinking, emotionally praying, Lord, how can I win this narrative? How can I articulate my conservative values and be on the offense and not the defense? So after about a year of reading and research, the aha moment came when God gave me the Frederick Douglass Republican Engagement Strategy. So a year later, I invited those same black Democrat friends of mine to my home to a football game viewing that I hosted. And reluctantly they came. And of course that night, subject of politics came up. Okay, Carl, he's a conservative, he's a Republican. I said, wait a minute. I'm more than a conservative. I'm more than a Republican. I am a Frederick Douglass Republican, and I embrace the life-empowering values that Frederick Douglass wrote and he spoke about. Yeah. Respect for the U.S. Constitution, respect for life, the belief in limited power of government, economic prosperity, free speech, parental school choice, the right of people keep and bear arms, religious liberty, legal immigration. Douglass wrote about these things. And when I shared them with my friends, all of them started talking about how they were a Frederick Douglass Republican too. Without using the word conservative, I focused on shared values. Those things I just listened to you, those are not issues. Those are values. Why? Values unite, issues divide. You follow me? Oh, God. Thank God we have the liberty message of Frederick Douglass to refute the lies of the left. Next slide. Next. Keep on going. So it's called the Frederick Douglass Republican Engagement Strategy. Let me break this down for you. I'm going to do a little role playing at the end. Because you got to know how to put this in play. Because I don't want you to leave here being intellectually obese. You got to know how to work this off. Don't just keep this to yourself and be obese intellectually. Get out there and engage. We'll talk about that. Next slide. So how did I come up with this? I was reading Apostle Paul, and Apostle Paul said this, and I kind of pleasurized it, because it's my story. I was not taught this. It was not given to me by any man. I received it by divine revelation from God. You're going to find out in a minute how God's put opened my eyes up to fix the problems we have with messaging in our brain. Next slide. See this image here? So the Trump campaign, y'all know this, they're using this to get the black vote. What an embarrassment. That's insulting to me and many blacks. So you got to engage in a gimmick, get the black vote, so black folks are not sophisticated enough intelligently to understand values and issues. The reason why you got to do this, these operatives, Tracy, they got to do this because they don't know how to talk to us. So you got to engage in a gimmick. Click one time for me. The problem with this, focus on shared values. Here's my concern. Next button. What's going to happen when Donald Trump is no longer a candidate? What's going to happen? We're going back with the same problem. This has no long-term, next slide, next point. This has no long-term political technique. It doesn't. I'm not voting for President Trump or support him because I think he's been discriminated against. I'm voting for him because his policies affects my pocketbook and my family. The problem is not blacks don't get it. The problem is Republicans don't know how to deliver the message. We always want to point the finger. Oh, blacks don't understand. No, look at those fingers pointing back. You know how to deliver it. So you got to engage in a gimmick. That's a gimmick. That's an insult. Those were operatives around him who's coming up with this. And it may not work. Who does it appeal to? Those who are tied to the criminal justice system? Well, some of them can't even vote. Come on now. Well, you got to engage in a gimmick. It boils, but that gets me hot. Because I'm more than that. You follow me? Next slide. To become a Frederick Douglass Republican has nothing to do with your skin color. It's about values. I'm gonna run down the 12 life empowering values of Frederick Douglass. Now notice now, I refer to them as life empowering values, not conservative values. We don't use that word. These are the life empowering values of Frederick Douglass. As I go through these values, keep in mind now, Frederick Douglass wrote and spoke about each one of them. So when you leverage what a runaway slave had to say about these values, they resonate. It is impossible to win an argument with a runaway slave about his love for liberty, his admiration for the founding fathers, his admiration for the U.S. Constitution. You can't win that argument. The left has no answer for Frederick Douglass. They never will. We got to be wise and leverage it. Next slide. Here are the life empowering values of Frederick Douglass. This is the common ground. These are the values we need to rest on to communicate the importance of liberty, not just to the black community, but now the little socialists running around in your house who went out and got this indoctrination. You got to engage them too, right? Go ahead. Next. I'll read them off as they come through. Respect for the U.S. Constitution. Next. Respect for life. Belief in the limited power of government. Notice now, I say the belief in the limited power of government. Stop saying the belief in limited government. Because when you say I believe in limited government, the left will spin that around and say, oh, you won't take my entitlements away. I believe in limited power of government, where I keep all the money that I make. All right? Next. Remember now, Frederick Douglass wrote and spoke about each one of these values I'm going through. The belief in economic prosperity. You know when Frederick Douglass passed away, now he was a slave for 20 years, right? When he passed away in 1895, Frederick Douglass had $300,000 in savings. That's over $30 million today in today's money. Next. The right of the people to keep and bear arms. Next. Free speech. So far, isn't the left attacking these things? That's why you got to leverage Frederick Douglass. What he said about it. Next. Religious liberty. Next. Women's right to vote. At that time, women's suffrage. Not women's rights, abortion. Women's right to vote, what he supported. Next. Legal immigration. And brother, about legal immigration. Everything I'm saying to you tonight is in detail in the book. Next. The right to vote. Oh, thank God we got Douglass. Parental school choice. Douglass wrote about parental school choice. Come on now. And next one. Oh my God. So that night my friends attacked. How much time I got left? Okay, I'm going. I got my pastor's watch on. Okay, there you go. Take your time. That's the pastor's watch. Take your time watch. So when my friends attacked me that night, I started thinking about why are they wearing me out about this word conservative? Now I don't have a PhD, but I've done some PhD level research I want to share with you. Why the word conservative, not only because of negative propaganda, but from a historical perspective, why the word conservative has a racist connotation. It all started back in 1964 when the LBJ signed the civil rights legislation. Okay? You remember now, back at that time, your staunch, next slide, your staunch racist Dixiecrat senators, they voted against it, filibustered the bill based on racist reasons. Remember that? Yes. Next slide. There was a certain Republican senator by the name of Barry Goldwater. He also voted against it, not because he was a racist, he voted against it based on constitutional grounds. Next slide. Robert Bork was a Yale University professor at that time. He wrote a 75-page opinion that Goldwater used to make up his mind how he's going to vote. So Goldwater voted against the civil rights legislation based on the next slide. Next. Title II, the dealt with accommodations. Title VII, the dealt with employment. Next slide. Goldwater was not a racist. In fact, Goldwater was an integrationist. What was his nickname? Mr. Conservative. Next slide. What was the title of the book Goldwater wrote in 1960, so over 3 million copies? The Conscience of a Conservative. I'm connecting some dots here. At the 1964 Republican Party convention held in San Francisco at the Cow Palace, next slide, who did the Republican Party nominate to run against LBJ? Mr. Conservative. The party of Lincoln, the party of emancipation, nominated a guy who sided, even though he wasn't a racist, his no vote sided with the racist Democrats. When that happened, black folks left the Republican Party en masse. My parents were staunch Republicans until 1964. When I said that, I said, oh my God. At that time, that's when the word conservative and the name Republican Party started to become culturally ingrained in the black community to mean racist. I said, oh my goodness, this is it. And ever since then, we've been behind the curve, right? So, next slide. So Goldwater was not a racist. He was an integrationist. When he inherited his family's department store, he was one of the first business owners in Phoenix to hire black cashiers. And he went around the city of Phoenix encouraging other business owners to integrate their establishment. Goldwater is an early member, charter member of the NAACP and the Urban League in Phoenix. Matter of fact, he took money out of his pocket to help the NAACP and the Urban League during their tough times when they got started financially. He was not a racist, he was an integrationist. Goldwater, 1953, he's the one who integrated the Senate cafeteria when one of his black staffers was refused service. Okay? And of course, in 1946, Goldwater, he founded the Arizona Air National Guard as an integrated unit 2 years before Truman integrated the armed forces. So Goldwater was not a racist, he was an integrationist, but the problem was, since he voted no, that put him in the same grouping with the racists. Okay? And he's running against who signed the bill. So at this time, the Republican Party did a masterful job of making the Democrat Party look like heroes to black folks. Next slide. Goldwater, I need some more water. Yeah, I ran out of water. Goldwater, on July 16, that's the day he accepted the Republican Party's nomination to be the presidential candidate. On that very same day, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was the president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, he issued a press release. See, I've done my homework. In that press release, I'm going to read the first paragraph to you. Subject: statement from Martin Luther King Jr. on Republican nominations of Senator Barry Goldwater. It says here, it is both unfortunate and disastrous that the Republican Party has nominated Senator Barry Goldwater as his candidate for the presidency of the United States. Next. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm highlight some stuff to you. You see the subject there? I'm looking, I found this thing. That was buried. Next slide. That's what I just got through saying. Next. And he says here, because Dr. King said, while not himself a racist, Dr. King even said Barry Goldwater wasn't a racist. But he went on to say, Mr. Goldwater articulates a philosophy which gives aid and comfort to the racists. What's the philosophy? Conservative philosophy. Wow. Okay? This is after the March on Washington. So now Dr. King has a household name. You follow me? My God. Next slide. Next. Stop saying that Dr. King was a Republican. It's not true. Dr. King was never a registered Republican. He voted Republican, but he was not a Republican. He was an independent. You look at me like I just robbed the bank. Next slide. Listen to Alveda in this YouTube video. Go ahead. It's about a minute long.
When we consider the King family legacy, it's much more spiritual than political. Of course, people always want to know if Martin Luther King Jr. was a Democrat or a Republican. Well, actually, he was an independent. His dad, Martin Luther King Sr., was a Republican who voted for President John Kennedy, a Democrat, during the time that Martin Luther King Jr. was incarcerated. And Granddaddy needed help from Washington to get his son out of jail. And he said, I'll vote and give a suitcase of votes to whoever gets my son out of jail. That ended up being President John Kennedy, who was reluctant, but his brother Bobby Kennedy says, help him. President Nixon said, I want to help him. His advisor said, don't help him. And so President Kennedy was credited to helping Martin Luther King Jr. be released from jail and won the vote of Daddy King. However, Daddy King was a staunch Republican much of his life. Martin Luther King Jr. said, Dixiecrats, Republicans, Democrats, I may have to speak to any of them at any time, and so I will be an independent. I'm a Frederick Douglass Republican. I've been a Democrat, an independent, and a Republican, but I'm a Frederick Douglass Republican.
All right, click.
So that is kind of how we are history.
So now, when you engage in, especially the black community, don't say Dr. King was a Republican. You're being intellectually dishonest. Okay? He was never a registered Republican. He voted Republican. Daddy King was a registered Republican much of his life, but he died a Democrat. Why? He supported Jimmy Carter and spoke at the DNC's convention. Why? The Republican Party made the Democrat Party look like heroes of black folks. Now, where do you think Alveda got the phrase Frederick Douglass Republican from? I give you one guess. Okay? This video was aired 2017. I've been talking about Frederick Republican since 2008. Okay? She gets it. All right? Now, Jackie Robinson, he was a special delegate at that convention, Republican Party National Convention in 1964 at the Cow Palace. Listen to this audio, because what happened was the black Republican delegates were mistreated by conservative Goldwater delegates at the convention. One guy's suit was set on fire with him in the suit. They were spat on. Their credentials, the RNC security wouldn't allow the black delegates to the floor who did not respect their credentials. This is at the convention now. The Republican Party made the Democrat Party look like heroes. Listen to this audio. This is not Jackie's voice. Listen to this audio what Jackie said in his autobiography about his experience at that convention. Go ahead.
During my life, I have had a few nightmares which happened to me while I was wide awake. One of them was the National Republican Convention in San Francisco, which produced the greatest disaster the Republican Party has ever known, nominee Barry Goldwater. A new breed of Republicans has taken over the GOP. It is a new breed which is seeking to sell to Americans a doctrine which is as old as mankind, the doctrine of racial division, the doctrine of racial prejudice, the doctrine of white supremacy. If I can couch in one single sentence the way I felt, watching this controlled steamroller operation roll into high gear, I would put it this way. I would say that I now believe I know how it felt to be a Jew in Hitler's Germany.
So now you got Martin Luther King Jr., Jackie Robinson, two prominent African Americans saying this about the Republican Party. You think they didn't resonate in the black community? So I did my research and said, okay, what was the black press? What did they say about what happened in San Francisco during that convention? Next slide. I got a few of them for you. Next. The Cleveland Called and Post said, GOP convention spurs Negroes. Next slide. Associated Negro Press, Negro delegates to GOP convention suffer a week of humiliation. The Republican Party is making the Democratic Party look like heroes. Keep that in the back of your mind as we go through this. And why you think the word conservative and Republican now has become culturally ingrained in the black community to mean racist. The word conservative in the black community is not the language of liberty, it's the language of oppression. Okay? Stop using it. Next slide. Next point. Chicago Defender said GOP Negroes washed away by Goldwater Ocean. Next. Jack Magazine, one of the most popular magazines back in the 60s and 70s. It was in every black barber shop, every beauty shop. It was always on the table. That's where we got our source of information. What did they say? The great purge of Negroes. So we do have a brand problem because of negative propaganda, but we also have a brand problem because of self-inflicted wounds. I'm talking about as a Republican and conservative. Okay? This is where we are. How are we going to overcome this? Is there an answer to overcome this? I'm going to give it to you in a minute. Okay? Next. I said this before, misstep of conservatives / Republicans made black Americans politically homeless. I asked my dad, I said, Dad, what happened? 64. He said, son, the Republican Party didn't want us, but the Democrat Party was worse. What you gonna do? Then the Democrat Party started courting black folks, right? With the Great Society plan. All the Dr. King lieutenants became Democrats and ran for office as Democrats, right? Next. I talked about that already. Next. I'll answer this a bit for you. Go back one. Go back one. In order to prove our brand, we have to recapture our political distinction. I'm talking about Republicans. You know that the Republican Party was founded by abolitionists. Who was the voice of the abolitionists? So a political party was started to end slavery, Republican Party. We got to recapture that political distinction. Because if we don't recapture it, the Democrats are going to co-opt the history of the Republican Party and call it their own. Matter of fact, they're already done so. Next slide. This is on the Democrat Party's website as of today. It has been on their website since 2013. The first part of the first sentence reads, for more than 200 years, our party has led the fight for civil rights. Wait a minute now. You know that's not true. But if you don't know the truth, you can't recognize a lie. Right? That's been on the website since 2013. They led, well, wait a minute now. They had to fight for civil rights for 200 years. I said, wait a minute, let me break this down. Next slide. 200 years. Next. So, I started in 1824. Slavery was in existence in 1824. Now, if you go to the internet, you ask somebody, when was the Republican Party started? Majority of the time, it's going to say 1828. It was started in 1792 with Thomas Jefferson. Yeah. Wait a minute. I said, oh my God, the master of deception. So let's take a look on this 200-year timeline, 200 years ago. What's some of the legislative action that took place where the Democrat Party can say they led the fight for civil rights? Let's take a look at this. Next. 1818, that's when Douglas was born. Douglas was born into slavery, right? The slave master were Democrats. Okay? Next. That's what I'm talking about. You Google it sometime, the internet will come up and say the Democrat Party started in 1828. Alright, next. The future slave law, passed by Democrats. If you're a black person walking around, you didn't have the right credentials, they put you behind back in slavery. Passed by Democrats, right? This is part of the 200 years where they led the fight for civil rights. Next. In 1853, Douglas gave a speech called the Slavery Party. In that speech, Douglas said this, for the present, the best representation of slavery in politics is the Democratic Party. You see why Douglas is important? His legacy of his literary legacy. Next. 1854, the Kansas-Nebraska Act authorized to extend slavery to Colorado, Montana, all but done by Democrats. Okay, next. Dred Scott decision, where the Democrat majority Supreme Court gave us the Dred Scott decision that blacks have no rights, that the white man is bound to respect. He's merely property and subject to the dictates of his owner. Democrats did that. Next. Ku Klux Klan was started by Democrats to make sure and curtail the influence of the Republican Party in the black community. Next, of course, you know about the civil rights legislation, where most of the Democrats voted against it. So if it's true that the Democrat Party has fought for civil rights, it wasn't black folks. Who was it? Have been the white slave masters. What else could it be? Okay, what else could it be? All right. That's what we're dealing with. Here's that quote again from Frederick Douglass, where in this country there's a purely slavery party, a party which exists for no other earthly reason but to promote the interests of slavery. For the president, the best representation of slavery politics is the Democrat Party. How are we going to get out of this? We got to improve our brand. We got to get people, because until you prove your brand, nobody will care about what you have to say. I don't care what the statistics are you say about abortion. There's nothing, if I perceive you to be a racist, there's nothing you can tell me. I don't care what statistic you bring me about abortion. I don't care. A racist can't tell me anything. We gotta overcome that. Next. Frederick Douglassism, the most effective liberty message to defeat Marxism. I'm gonna show you something here. I'm gonna show you this slide. When I show you this slide, I use this slide all the time when I engage people who've been indoctrinated to Marxism, especially the BLM members that I see sometimes in my church. When I share this with them, a light bulb comes on. Because most people who've been indoctrinated to Marxism have never heard the liberty message of Frederick Douglass. Next. Let's quickly contrast the lies of Frederick Douglass and Karl Marx. Keep your eyes open here. Next. Both Karl Marx and Frederick Douglass were born in 1818. Frederick Douglass was born into slavery. He was a slave for 20 years. Karl Marx, in my view, is the poster child for white privilege. Now, don't get upset because I'm using the word white privilege, but I'm playing on this because that's a communist term to make sure we have racial division. The man they worship and follow is the poster child for white privilege. That's the fallacy of their philosophy. Karl Marx is the father of communism. Frederick Douglass, in my view, is America's greatest writer, thinker, and speaker when it comes to liberty. The greatest. Why? He writes having a former slave perspective, and the founders don't bring that to the table. Douglass was not a racist, he was a victim of racism. Douglass did not own the slave, he was a slave. And in his writings and his speeches, he affirmed the founding fathers, he affirmed the Constitution, and the left has no answer for it. That's why we got to leverage it. And thank God, Frederick Douglass was a self-proclaimed Republican. You got to focus on Dr. King, focus on Douglass. All right? All right. Karl Marx was a theorist. He wrote about oppression. He wrote about things he never experienced. Frederick had real life experiences about oppression. He was a slave. Yeah. Next slide. Karl Marx, of course, believed in government dependency. Frederick Douglass believed in our God-given rights. Next. Karl Marx never had a real job in his life. His father was a lawyer. He married into money. His wife came from a successful business family. His business partner, Frederick Engels, helped him financially. Karl Marx never had a real job. Frederick Douglass was a free market entrepreneur. All right, next. Karl Marx was an atheist. Frederick Douglass was an ordained anti-Zionist preacher. Come on now. So when I share this with young people, they got to decide, why are you following this guy? He never experienced oppression versus this guy. They never heard it. Next. Karl Marx was a revolutionist. Marxists are revolutionists, meaning that they want to tear everything up, shred the Constitution, start over. Douglass said in his third autobiography, Douglass said, quote, I'm not a revolutionist, I'm a reformer. Let's keep the best that we have, make things better, to include the Constitution. See why you got to leverage Douglass? Next, I'm going fast now. Karl Marx died in abject poverty. Douglass died with $300,000 in savings and gave 4 of his children $50,000. Here's why Douglass is so powerful. It's not just his message of liberty, but no matter which victim category the left try to put people in, nobody today can out-victimize Frederick Douglass. That's the key point. Next. So what are you getting me at this up? Liberty versus tyranny. When you show that to people, there's an awakening that occurs. All right? He's the answer to save this nation. He's the answer to save your community. He's the answer to help rebrand the Republican Party. He's the answer to messaging. Next. Y'all okay? Yeah. All right, I got it. So, break this down for you. So, this engagement strategy, Launched it back in 2008. Next. What is the FDR engagement strategy based on? Y'all ready for this? Next slide. Number one is based on the liberty message of Frederick Douglass. That's number one. Go to the next slide. It's based on the outreach ministry of Jesus Christ. How's okay, Carl? Let's go to Acts, the first chapter. Go to Acts, the first chapter. After 3 years of training the disciples, Christ sat down with the disciples and said, wait a minute now, don't you leave and do any engagement until you receive the power. Christ was referring to the power of the Holy Spirit. Yep. But remember, he trained them for 3 years. Don't you go do any engagement until you receive the power. The power is in training. And in that verse, that chapter there, follow the process now. He said to them, when you go out to do engagement, I want you to go to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, other parts of the earth. Follow me now. Where is Jerusalem? Home. Your Thanksgiving dinner table is a symbolic representation of your Jerusalem. It's your precinct. We call that in-reach. See, Republicans don't get it. Oh, we got to go do outreach. No, don't you do any outreach because you can't do any in-reach. You can't start at home, man. Come on. Don't go out and try to engage people with outreach. You may see them one time. It's going to be a perfect opportunity. Start with in-reach and practice on your family members till you get it right. Jerusalem, Judea. Where's Judea? Oh, the community outside where you live. Then he said, go to Samaria. Wait a minute now. Where is Samaria? Now you're going to a community where people may not look like you and could be antagonistic. That's outreach. Outreach is not first. You start home. We want to do outreach. No, you don't know how to do outreach. You follow me? All right. Next slide. Hit it again. The FDR engagement strategy is also based on the diversity engagement strategy of the Apostle Paul. When you really think about it, the Apostle Paul, he was a diversity engagement specialist. God called him, commissioned him to take the gospel to the Gentiles, people of different what? Ethnicities, right? By occupation, the Apostle Paul, he was an attorney and he was a tent maker. God called the Apostle Paul to establish a big tent. Big tent is a metaphoric expression for diversity outreach. What do we say all the time as Republicans? We need to have a big tent. In 1 Corinthians 9:22, the Apostle Paul says something like this: I become all things to all people, so that I may reach a few. When you read some other translation, the Apostle Paul saying, I entered their world, the Gentiles, and I tried to experience life from their viewpoint. That's how I knew what words to use, what not to use. If you enter my world as a black American, and not just black American, but young kids, they go on to college, get indoctrinated. If you enter their world, the word conservative is not the language of liberty, it's the language of oppression. Stop using the word. It's leading us to defeat. Okay. The other thing is, next slide. Here's my thing. When you take a look at ministry of the Apostle Paul, Paul had a brand problem. Did he not? Yep. The Gentiles shook with fear when they heard that brother's name. They knew what he was doing, persecuting those Christians in Jerusalem and Judea. Allow me to use my biblical imagination for a moment. What was some of the talk among the Gentiles about Paul when he came over there trying to get them to become Christians? Y'all look at Paul. Look at him. That no good liar. He's over here trying to get us to become Christians so he can persecute us too. He's a racist. He's a bigot. You know those words sound familiar? That's what they say about conservatives, right? So here's the question. There's no denying that Apostle Paul had a tremendous impact in the early growth of the church. How did Paul, in order to have that impact, how did he improve his brand? How did he trump the race card? At a minimum, he embraced three concepts, and we need to mimic this and learn from these three. You ready? What do you think the first thing he did? What do you think the first thing Paul embraced in order to improve his brand? Next slide. He had a name change. Went from Saul to Paul, right? The word Saul carried a negative connotation. The word Paul is more appealing to the Gentiles. The word conservative carries a negative connotation. The name Frederick Douglass is more appealing to Americans. You follow me? So when you take Frederick Douglass with the word Republican to it, you just created an oxymoron. And most folks don't get it because Frederick Douglass is an icon of liberty because of negative propaganda, Republican icon of racism. The two don't go together. So when you tell somebody you're a Frederick Douglass Republican, you just broke their brain, and now they don't know what you're talking about. That's when you got to have content to come behind the phrase. You can't just utter the phrase. You got to know what you're talking about. You follow? Get a name change. Next. I got this up because I was thinking about this the other day. Now we have Trump's daughter-in-law at the RNC. I don't know what's going to happen, but they continue what they've been doing, we're going to lose. This is the perfect time to rebrand the Republican Party. This is matter of fact, this is the best time. What we're going to do with it? And you can't do it without us. If we're going to rebrand the Republican Party, we got to get back and recapture our political distinction. We got to get back to our foundation. When you go back, you land on Douglas. You follow me? He's the answer. If you know a better messaging strategy than this, let me know. I'll stop doing what I'm doing and join that. You're not going to find it. You're not going to find a messaging strategy that fuses the message of Frederick Douglass, outreach strategy of Apostle Paul, engagement strategy of Apostle Paul, outreach message of Jesus Christ. I didn't come up with this. I was given this. Okay? I'm not a preacher, but I've been chosen. Next. The Apostle Paul, number 2, he articulated his transformation. He didn't just quote the Christ, he talked about how the teachings of Jesus Christ changed his thinking, changed his mind. He had a transformation. We got to have a similar political testimony. You just can't quote Frederick Douglass. You got to say, I've been inspired by the liberty message of Frederick Douglass. I'm more than a conservative. I'm more than a Republican. I'm a Frederick Douglass Republican. I hold Frederick Douglass in high esteem. It's not that we're putting Douglass on a pedestal, but what we're focusing on, the values he embraced is what we're focusing on. And he is the ideal embodiment of conservative values. Follow me? All right, next slide. Transformation is key. This is Tea Party Danny. Let Tea Party Danny talk to you. Go ahead, Tea Party Danny.
I'm Danny. I'm with the Tea Party Veterans of North Alabama. And there in Florence, I went to an insurance company, and the receptionist, the lady was black, landowning company, he was white, and he was conservative. He was saying, you need to talk to this lady. She is real big in the Democrat Party here in Florence, so I didn't talk to her, so I went up there speaking with her, and she made the point, I guess you're a Republican. And I said, well, yes, but what I really am is I'm a Frederick Douglass Republican. And she's talking, she said, oh, put her hands up. She said, well, I can't touch that. I can't handle that. And so I thought that was a very interesting approach there, the way she did. We had a great conversation and dealing with great values. And she did share my values as far as against abortion, homosexual marriage. She believed in Bible principles and everything along that line. It was just a wonderful reaction that the lady had, knowing that she could not handle a Frederick Douglass Republican.
All right, next slide. So you don't have to be black to engage this strategy and be successful, right? Matter of fact, this strategy is more successful when a white person leverages it than a black person. Why? Because of propaganda, all white conservatives and Republicans are racist. And you come out, you got the content, once you carefully study and show yourself approved. I hold Frederick Douglass in high esteem. I've been inspired by his liberty message and his life. When you come with a testimony like that and you're genuine about it, you just shook up the world. A racist conservative is not going to say that. Would never say that. Because when you say that, the person that's listening to you is thinking you had your Damascus Road experience. You've been transformed. And racism comes off the table, Uncle Tomism comes off the table. Here's where we messed up when it comes to engaging Republicans, we want to go out there and start talking about facts, talk about statistics, talk about truth, and talk about evidence. None of that means a thing if you're not operating from a position of trust and credibility. We got to learn how to create trust and credibility for ourselves in order to be heard. How you create trust and credibility, you got to have a name change. You got to talk about your transformation. Even though you've never been a racist, I encourage you, let people know you had a transformation because you're guilty by association. All right? Next slide. I'm going to speed up here now. The third thing Paul did, Paul demonstrated his transformation. So he had a name change, he articulated, he demonstrated. He traveled throughout Asia Minor, he went to places folks never been before, okay? He had good deeds. He was in the community, engaging with people. He was supposed to be racist to us, right? We gotta have a similar way of engaging. You gotta have some good deeds. And one of the best good deeds I know that work, you gotta wear the message. You gotta put Douglas on your chest and invite conversations, okay? And know the content that come behind how to articulate and change hearts and minds. That's the answer. The answer is not putting Trump on a t-shirt to show about how he's been incarcerated. The answer is put Douglas on a t-shirt, talk about how the brother's free. You follow? Tracy, they don't get it. These officers don't get it. And they're leading us down the drain. They don't get it, Tracy. They think a black man from Alabama don't have the intellectual power to figure this thing out. This has been a problem for 60 years. Lo and behold, here's the black guy from Alabama figured it out. No, God gave it to me. I didn't figure nothing out. I just made myself available. That's all. All right, next. I'm going to go fast.